Zara stood alone on the edge of the barren world, her eyes gazing out at the endless horizon. The planet was cold and lifeless, just like the feeling inside her chest. It was a strange place for someone who had once been loved. Her heart felt as empty as the world around her, the silence loud in her ears. She had always been different. Zara wasn't like the other members of her species. While they were strong, fast, and capable of extraordinary feats, she had always struggled. Her abilities were weak, far weaker than the others. Her family had never understood her. They had tried to teach her, to help her become stronger, but nothing worked. It was like something inside her couldn't keep up with the rest of them. Her father, the leader of their tribe, had always been the first to point out her weaknesses. "You are a burden, Zara," he would say. "You hold us back. We cannot move forward with someone like you in our ranks." His words would sting, but over time, she had learned to ignore them. However, that day as her family prepared to leave their home and travel to a new world, she had felt something shift within her. Her family had gathered in a circle, preparing to board their ship. Zara stood at the edge, hoping for some sign of affection, some sign of love, but none came. Her mother barely looked at her, and her brothers, always so quick to point out her shortcomings, didn't even offer a goodbye. Only her younger sister, Lyra, looked at her with sadness in her eyes. But even Lyra knew what had to be done. "Zara, you have to understand," Lyra whispered. "It's for the good of our people. You're just holding us back. I wish things were different. But we can't stay here because of you." Zara's heart shattered as Lyra turned away, joining the rest of the family. Her mother's cold gaze was the last thing she saw before the ship's engines roared to life. She tried to call out to them, but her voice felt hollow, drowned out by the sound of the ship's departure. The ship lifted off, leaving her standing alone on a planet that was slowly becoming as empty as her heart. For hours she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the sky, hoping that somehow her family would come back. But as the sun began to set, the reality of the situation set in. She had been abandoned, alone. She was no longer needed. Zara felt small. Her body, once strong, felt weak, and the burden of her existence weighed heavily on her shoulders. But as the darkness of the night settled in, a strange sound reached her ears, a distant rumble. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the usual noise of the planet's natural creatures. This was different. A sound she had never heard before. Curiosity pushed her forward, even though fear gripped her chest. Zara moved cautiously, her bare feet making no sound on the cold ground. The rumbling grew louder as she drew closer to the source. She came to a clearing where something enormous lay in a heap. It was like a ship, but unlike any ship she had seen before. Its design was unlike the sleek, advanced ships of her people. This one was rough, with odd markings and strange materials. It had clearly crash-landed here. The smell of burning metal filled the air, and Zara's heart raced. Her first instinct was to run. She had been abandoned by her own kind. Who knew what this strange ship might bring? But something held her in place. A strange curiosity. She couldn't look away. She got closer. She noticed movement. Someone or something was still alive inside. Zara felt a twinge of hope. Could it be? Could someone else be stranded here like she was? She moved closer, stepping carefully over the wreckage. The ship was smoking, but there was a weak, flickering light coming from inside. Inside, she found him. A human, a strange creature, much smaller than her kind, but unmistakably alive. His body was battered, his clothes torn, and his face was covered in blood. He was unconscious, but breathing. A strange human had been hurt badly. Zara felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Empathy. Without thinking, she knelt down beside him. Her fingers brushed against his skin, warm but clammy. She had never touched a human before, but instinct told her what to do. She tore a piece of her own clothing and pressed it against his wounds, trying to slow the bleeding. She had never learned human medicine, but the basics of survival were universal. She couldn't just leave him there to die. Zara didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe it was because she wanted to prove to herself that she wasn't completely worthless. Maybe it was because she didn't want to be alone anymore. Whatever the reason, she kept working. She carefully used her limited knowledge to stabilize his condition, checking his pulse, his breathing, his wounds. As she worked, she realized something strange. She felt a connection to this human. His pain, his weakness, was something she understood all too well. As she worked to save his life, Zara wondered if this was the universe's way of offering her a second chance. After all, here she was, a girl who had been abandoned for being weak, now taking care of a stranger. A human. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as useless as she had been told. The human began to stir, his eyes fluttering open. Confusion clouded his face as he looked around, then at Zara. She froze, unsure of what he would think. Would he see her as a threat? Or would he, like her family, see her as a burden? Who are you? The human asked weakly, his voice hoarse from the crash. Zara hesitated, but then she spoke. I'm Zara, she said softly, and you're safe now. The human didn't respond at first, but then he nodded faintly, too weak to say anything more. And in that moment, something shifted inside Zara. She wasn't alone anymore. Maybe. Just maybe this human could teach her something about strength, about survival, and about the power of compassion. The journey ahead would be uncertain, but Zara finally felt the spark of something greater than fear and loneliness. Maybe her life wasn't as empty as she thought. Maybe it was just beginning. Zara stood back, her heart racing as the strange human stirred on the ground. His face was covered in blood, his breath shallow, and his body limp. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen, smaller, fragile, yet there was something about him that intrigued her. The way his chest rose and fell, each breath like a battle, made her feel a strange pull inside. She hadn't felt anything like it before. She didn't know if it was fear, curiosity, or something deeper. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He was from a different world, a creature from a distant planet she could never imagine. Zara's people didn't interact with humans. They were too different, too small and fragile. Her family had taught her that they weren't worth much, just a fleeting curiosity for explorers. But here he was, a human who had crashed on her planet, and she had the chance to do something no one else had helped him. Her hands shook as she reached for the wreckage, pulling away the pieces that covered him. He wasn't moving much, his eyes barely open, but Zara's instinct kicked in. She needed to help. No one had ever needed her before, not truly. Her family had abandoned her because of her weakness, but here was a life in her hands. She had to act, or he would die alone. Just like she had feared she might, she wiped her brow, the cool night air brushing against her face as she quickly examined his injuries. There was no time to be scared. She had to do something. She carefully pressed her hands against his side, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. Her own blood was rushing through her ears as she worked, her thoughts a blur. He was alive, but not for long if she didn't act quickly. The human's eyes fluttered open for a moment. He blinked, his gaze dazed, but then he seemed to focus. On her, Zara froze, her heart skipping a beat. He was staring at her, his eyes wide with confusion, his lips parted in disbelief. Who you? He whispered, his voice hoarse, as if he had been choking on the very air. Zara opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. How could she explain herself to a stranger from another world? The truth was, she didn't know what she was doing here, why she was helping him. She was the one who had been abandoned. She wasn't the hero of any story. She was just a weak girl who couldn't even take care of herself. I'm Zara, she finally said, her voice trembling. I found you. You were hurt. The human's eyes slowly focused on her, confusion flickering across his face. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He reached a hand toward his chest, as if to check if the pain was still there, but his fingers were slow, weak. Where am I? He asked after a long pause. What happened? Zara could only shrug helplessly. She had no answers for him. She had no idea where he was from or how he had come to crash on her world. All she knew was that he needed her, and for the first time in her life, that made her feel important. She didn't answer his question. She wasn't sure how to explain that she didn't know. Instead, she focused on his injuries. His wounds were deep, and she had no proper supplies to treat him. But something inside her told her to keep going, to find a way. She couldn't just leave him like this. She wasn't like her family. She wouldn't turn her back on someone in need. Zara's hands moved quickly as she ripped a piece of her torn clothing and pressed it to his chest, trying to stem the blood flow. She didn't even think to question what she was doing. There was only the need to keep him alive, to prove to herself that she wasn't a burden, that she had a purpose. The human's breathing was uneven, each breath a struggle. Zara's mind raced. How could she save him? What did she know about human anatomy? But she did know survival. She knew that sometimes you had to make do with what you had. Her people weren't like the humans. They didn't need tools to survive. Their instincts were their tools. And right now, she had to trust hers. After what felt like hours, the human's breathing steadied. His eyes, though still dazed, began to focus more clearly. His hand twitched and he weakly tried to sit up, but the pain in his body kept him down. "Thank you for helping me," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes, now fully aware, met hers, and something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. There was no fear in his eyes, only gratitude. Zara nodded silently, her throat tight. She didn't know why she was doing this, but she was. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was because she needed to feel something other than the loneliness that had haunted her for so long. Maybe it was because in this moment someone saw her, someone needed her. She wasn't a burden to him. She was something else, a lifeline. As the hours passed, Zara stayed by his side, keeping the fire going, doing everything she could to help him recover. But there was still something unsettling about him, something different. He was an alien to her, but in some strange way he wasn't so different after all. He was someone who had fallen, just like her. Abandoned, lost, and now, maybe they could help each other. As the sun began to rise over the barren planet, Zara looked at the human lying before her. She had no idea where this journey would lead. She didn't even know what he would think of her when he fully recovered. But for now, she felt something new, hope, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the burden she had always believed herself to be. The days passed slowly, like the steady drip of water on a stone. Zara watched as the human Jason, as he had finally introduced himself, recovered. His body, though frail and broken, began to regain its strength. He could sit up now without wincing in pain, and his eyes, once clouded with confusion and fear, started to focus on his surroundings with greater clarity. Zara found herself staying close, always watching him, always making sure he was okay. The strange sense of responsibility she felt for him had grown stronger with each passing moment. She couldn't explain why. It wasn't out of obligation. It wasn't because she had to. No, this feeling was something new, something powerful that she hadn't expected. Jason wasn't like her family. He didn't look at her with pity or disappointment. He didn't call her weak or a burden. In fact, he never said a single word that made her feel inferior. Every time their eyes met, there was a silent understanding, a connection that neither of them had expected. For the first time in her life, Zara wasn't seen as a problem to be fixed. She was simply seen. She was valued. One morning, as Zara gathered food for their small campfire, Jason stumbled over to her, still unsteady but determined. His face was tired, his body still healing, but his eyes held something different now. There was no more fear, no more confusion. There was gratitude. And perhaps, just perhaps, something more. "Zara," Jason said, his voice softer than before. I can't thank you enough. You saved my life. I don't know what I would have done without you." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard someone speak to her like that before. No one had ever thanked her for just existing, let alone for something so important. "You don't need to thank me," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just what I had to do." Jason paused, studying her with an intensity that made Zara uncomfortable. She shifted her weight, trying to avoid his gaze, but he stepped closer, his eyes not leaving hers. "No," he said slowly. "It's not just that. You could have left me there." You could have turned away and gone on with your life. But you didn't, you stayed. Why? Zara swallowed hard, trying to put words to the feeling she had. She had no answer for him, not one that made sense. What did it mean? Was it because she had no choice? Was it because, in that moment, someone needed her and she hadn't known how to walk away? I don't know, Zara admitted, looking down at her feet. I think I just didn't want to be alone anymore. Jason didn't respond right. Away, he seemed to absorb her words, turning them over in his mind. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost hesitant. I don't know how to get back to my world, he said. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I'm stranded here, and I don't want to be alone either. Zara's heart tightened. She understood that feeling all too well. The ache of loneliness that gnawed at your soul, the fear of being forgotten. That's why she had stayed with him. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving him alone, stranded in an unfamiliar world. It was the same reason she had felt abandoned by her family. No one ever truly stayed. No one ever truly cared. But here she was, sitting next to someone who had no reason to trust her, and yet here he was, offering her something she had never been given before. Companionship. We'll figure it out, Zara said, her voice steady despite the flutter of uncertainty in her chest. You're not alone anymore. We'll find a way. Jason seemed to relax a little, the tension easing from his shoulders. He gave her a small, grateful smile, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zara returned it. It wasn't the smile of someone who had been abandoned or discarded. It was the smile of someone who had found a connection, a bond between two beings who were, in so many ways, completely different, yet exactly the same. The days that followed were filled with quiet conversations and shared moments. Zara taught Jason about her world, its strange, wild beauty, and Jason, in turn, spoke of his own. He told her about his life on Earth, his family, his dreams. His stories were strange and foreign to her, but Zara listened intently, fascinated by every word. She had never heard of a place like Earth, a planet so full of life and chaos. She could barely imagine it. In the evenings, as the twin moons of her planet rose high in the sky, Zara and Jason would sit together by the fire, their quiet conversation drifting into the night. It was strange, this growing sense of friendship, of trust between them. In the past, Zara had always been the outsider, the one who never truly belonged. But now, with Jason beside her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. For once, she wasn't invisible. Zara had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone anymore. She had someone who cared, someone who had seen her when no one else had. And that was enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than being a burden. Maybe there was strength in the bond they were forming, something that neither of them could have anticipated. The days passed, and each one felt a little lighter than the last. Zara and Jason began to build a life together on the desolate planet, not just surviving, but living. There were moments of laughter, moments of quiet understanding, and moments when Zara could almost believe that, despite everything, the universe might have something good in store for her after all. And perhaps the strangest part of all was that, in helping Jason, Zara was starting to help herself. The alien planet was vast and wild, its landscape as beautiful as it was unforgiving. Zara had grown accustomed to the barren stretches of land, the dark skies, and the strange, otherworldly creatures that roamed the wilderness. It was a harsh world, one that had never felt like home to her. But now, with Jason by her side, everything seemed different. The mornings were cold, the ground crackling beneath their feet as they moved through the dense, wild underbrush. Zara led the way, Jason stumbling behind her, still recovering from his injuries. He was weaker than he admitted, but he tried not to show it. Zara could see the determination in his eyes. He was not someone to give up easily, and that was something Zara respected more than anything. But even in his fragile state, he insisted on helping. He would gather firewood, try to help her set up camp, though often he ended up sitting down to catch his breath after a few minutes. Zara didn't mind. It was a strange comfort having someone by her side. She wasn't used to it, but it felt right. They moved carefully through the dense forests of the planet, where the trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves a shimmering green that seemed to glow in the soft light. The air smelled thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the ground was soft, spongy, as if the planet itself was alive. "This place is beautiful," Jason remarked one morning as they paused to rest. His voice was soft, filled with awe as he took in the towering trees and the wild beauty of the planet. Zara glanced over at him, her own thoughts far from the scenery. She had never thought much about the planet's beauty. It was always just a place she had to survive in. She had spent so many years struggling to find her place here, always feeling out of place, that she had never paused to appreciate the wonders around her. But now, with Jason, it was different. She saw the planet through new eyes, eyes that weren't filled with anger or resentment. For the first time, she felt like she could actually live here. As they walked deeper into the forest, Zara noticed the small things, how the light filtered through the leaves in soft beams, how the wind whispered through the trees like a song. For the first time, the planet didn't seem so desolate. It wasn't just a place of isolation, it was a place of life. It was a place that was thriving despite the harsh conditions, just like her, just like Jason. Later that day, they came across a river. It wasn't large, but its waters were clear, glistening under the setting sun. The sound of the flowing water was calming, and for a moment Zara felt at peace, something she hadn't felt in years. Jason knelt by the river's edge, cupping his hands to drink. He looked over at Zara as he wiped his mouth. "This is incredible. I can't believe I'm here, on a completely different planet with you. I thought I was done for when I crashed. But you do saved me." Zara didn't respond right away. She hadn't thought about it that way. She hadn't saved him because she thought it would lead to anything. She saved him because she couldn't bear to leave someone stranded like she had been. It wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about a grand adventure. It was about surviving, together. "We're both survivors," Zara said quietly, her gaze turning toward the horizon. "This world is tough, but I think we can survive here, together." Jason smiled at her, the warmth in his expression making Zara's chest tighten. It was a smile of understanding, of connection. He wasn't just thanking her for saving his life. He was thanking her for showing him that there was still hope, that there was still a way forward even when everything seemed lost. The next few days were filled with a strange sense of partnership. Zara taught Jason how to gather food, how to identify the different plants and animals that roamed the planet. Some of the plants were edible, others poisonous, but Jason quickly learned which ones to avoid. They learned how to trap small creatures for food, how to build shelters that could withstand the unpredictable weather. They were learning, surviving, and adapting together in a way neither of them had expected. For Zara, it was a strange feeling teaching someone, sharing her knowledge. It wasn't something she had ever done before. Her people had always kept to themselves, never reaching out, never trusting anyone outside their own kind. But with Jason, it felt natural. It felt right. As they sat by the fire one night, Zara couldn't help but glance at Jason, who was poking at the fire with a stick, his eyes lost in thought. She had never thought of herself as a teacher. She had always been the one who needed help, the one who was seen as weak, as a burden. But now, for the first time in her life, she was teaching someone. And it wasn't just about survival. It was about trust, about connection. "I'm glad we found each other," Jason said, looking up at her, his eyes serious. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Zara felt something stir inside her, a warmth, a feeling she hadn't expected. She had been alone for so long, cut off from everything, from everyone. But now, here with Jason, she didn't feel so alone anymore. They had built something together, however small it seemed. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to begin something new. The next day, they moved further into the planet's wilderness, their bond growing stronger with each step. They had no idea what awaited them, but for the first time, Zara felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And maybe, just maybe, Jason had brought that to her. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Zara looked up at the sky and felt a flicker of hope. The quiet, serene life Zara had begun to build with Jason was suddenly shattered by a loud, unmistakable sound that reverberated through the air. It was the unmistakable hum of engines powerful, mechanical, and all too familiar. Zara froze. In place, her heart pounding in her chest as a sense of dread flooded her veins. She recognized that sound. It was her family's ship. Jason, who had been gathering firewood, looked up, his expression confused but alert. Zara's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. They had left her behind. Her family had abandoned her, casting her aside. Like an unwanted relic, why were they back? The hum grew louder, and soon a dark shape appeared on the horizon. The ship's sleek, metallic surface reflected the harsh light of the twin suns, its shadow growing larger with each passing second. Zara's body stiffened, her mind racing. They were coming for her, but why? What could they possibly want after all this time? As the ship descended and landed with a soft thud on the planet's surface, Zara's heart twisted with a mixture of fear, anger, and something else she couldn't quite identify. She had long since given up on the idea of ever being welcomed back. She had accepted her fate, abandoned, forgotten, and left to survive alone. But now, here they were, returning as though nothing had ever happened. The door of the ship hissed open, and one by one her family stepped out, their familiar forms emerging from the ship's interior. Her father led the way, his expression as cold and stern as ever. Her mother followed closely behind, her face unreadable. Her brothers and sister were there too, though they looked different, older, perhaps more hardened by time. But the person Zara locked eyes with first was Lyra, her younger sister, who had always been the one to show her the most affection. But even now, Lyra didn't look at her with the same warmth she had once offered. Zara's body tensed. She wanted to shout, to demand answers, to tell them how much their abandonment had hurt her. But her voice was caught in her throat. They were here now, and part of her wondered if they had come back to apologize, to make things right. Her father's voice broke the silence, his words cutting through the air with the same sharpness they had always held. Zara, he said, his gaze settling on her, it's time to come home. We've made a mistake. We shouldn't have left you. The planet is not the same without you. Zara's heart twisted painfully, and for a moment, she almost believed him. Almost. Her father took a step forward, but Zara stayed rooted to the spot, her feet unwilling to move. You were always a burden, Zara, he continued, his voice softening, but still carrying an air of authority. We've seen it now. We thought you might never make it. But here you are, alive and— He hesitated, his eyes flicking to Jason, who stood beside Zara, looking at the family with quiet curiosity. And with someone else, Zara's chest tightened. She hadn't expected them to return, much less expect her to just come back without question. The years of harsh words and indifference, the pain of being cast aside, all came rushing back to her in a wave of bitterness. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She couldn't believe. They were asking her to come back after everything. It's not like before, Zara finally said, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. I've learned, I've changed. I don't need your approval anymore. Her father's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Zara saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in his gaze, regret, perhaps. But it quickly faded, replaced by the same coldness that had always been there. You don't understand, he replied, his tone dismissive. You were never meant to survive alone. You belong with your family. It's where you'll be safe. And now, you've gone and made a connection with this human. His words dripped with disdain as he glanced at Jason. You were always weak, Zara. You don't belong here. You never did. The weight of his words hit Zara like a physical blow. The sting of rejection, of being told she wasn't worthy, of being viewed as nothing more than a burden, threatened to overwhelm her. She had spent years wondering if there was something wrong with her, wondering if she was truly useless, as her father had always said. But now, with Jason by her side, she finally understood. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a burden. She had survived on her own in a world that had once seemed impossible to navigate. Jason, Sensing the tension in the air, stepped forward. His presence was steady, calm, and unwavering. He met Zara's father's gaze without fear, his voice firm. "Zara doesn't need to go back with you," Jason said quietly. "She's made her choice. We've both made our choice." Zara looked at Jason, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and something else she couldn't name. He wasn't afraid to stand up for her. He wasn't telling her to go back to a life she had long since outgrown. In that moment, Zara realized that he wasn't just a survivor in the physical sense. He was the first person to truly see her for who she was and to stand beside her. Not in judgment, but in solidarity. Her father's face flushed with anger. "You have no right to speak, human," he spat, his voice filled with disdain. "But—" Zara shook her head, stepping closer to Jason. "No, you don't understand. I don't belong with you anymore. Not like this. Not after everything you've done." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. "I've found something here. Something real. I'm not going back." Her family fell silent, her father's gaze filled with frustration. Her mother, however, took a step forward, her expression softening for the first time. "Zara, .. Zara looked at her, her heart torn. This wasn't how she had imagined it, but it was the truth. She didn't need them anymore. She had found a new life, a new purpose with Jason. "No," Zara said firmly, her voice steady despite the conflict swirling inside her. "I'm staying here. This is where I belong now." The family stood there, staring at her, each of them processing her words in their own way. But Zara knew deep down that there was no going back. She had moved past the pain of abandonment. She had learned to survive, and now she had learned to live. And with Jason by her side, she knew she was stronger than she had ever been before. The days following her family's return were filled with tension, as if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Zara had made her choice, and though it was clear to her, she could see the uncertainty in Jason's eyes, the doubt that lingered, not about their survival, but about their future. She could feel it too, the weight of what lay ahead. Zara had grown accustomed to the way her family's presence had always loomed over her decisions. Their expectations, their judgments, had shaped her into someone who always second-guessed her worth, but here, with Jason, it was different. She no longer needed to seek approval. She wasn't bound by their rules. Yet, a part of her still felt the pull of the past, a lingering need to prove that she wasn't the burden they had claimed her to be. The day after her family's departure, Zara wandered alone away from their camp. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the strange landscape. The colors seemed brighter than usual, more alive in eerie contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She had to think. She had to figure out what was next. Jason's footsteps behind her made her pause. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He had been following her at a distance, giving her space to breathe, but she knew he couldn't let her stay in solitude forever. He wouldn't. He had become her constant, in a way that she hadn't expected. "I can't stop thinking about it." Jason's voice broke the silence as he approached, his words laced with a sense of quiet understanding. Zara turned to face him, her heart heavy. She had been avoiding this conversation, but now, here it was, unavoidable. "About what?" Zara asked, her voice low, almost defensive. "The choice you made," he said, taking a step closer, his gaze not leaving hers. "I know it wasn't easy for you. You've spent so much of your life wanting to belong to them, to your family. But now you've chosen something else. You've chosen me and this world." Zara's breath caught in her throat. The simplicity of his words hit her harder than she expected. "I don't know if I've really chosen you, Jason," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. "I've chosen this life, but I've also left everything behind. My family, my people. It feels like a part of me is missing, and I don't know if I can ever truly walk away from that. From them." Jason's expression softened, a flicker of empathy crossing his face. "I understand," he said, his voice gentle. "You've been taught to believe that your family is the most important thing. But sometimes the hardest thing to realize is that you don't need anyone's approval to be worth something. You've always been worth it, Zara. You've always had what it takes to survive. And now, you're choosing something new. And that's okay. Zara's heart ached with the truth of his words. She had always believed that she needed to prove herself to her family, to show them that she wasn't weak. But what if, just maybe, she was strong enough to live for herself, to not be defined by their rejection? I don't know if I'm ready to leave it all behind, Zara whispered, her hands trembling as she hugged them to her chest. It feels like if I walk away from them now, I'm admitting they were right all along. That I am just a burden. I'm just you, Jason finished for her, his words simple but profound. You're just you, and that's enough. You don't have to carry their burden anymore, Zara. You've carried it your whole life, and it's weighed you down. It's not your burden to carry, not anymore. Zara's mind raced as she processed his words. The heavy burden that had followed her throughout her life, the feeling of being less than everyone else seemed to lift for the first time. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't weak, she was just her. And that was enough. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, Zara looked at Jason, really looked at him, for the first time without hesitation. She realized something that made her chest tighten with emotion. She wasn't alone anymore, and she didn't need her family's approval to be happy. I've never had someone believe in me like you do, Zara said softly, her voice barely a whisper. I'm scared, Jason, but maybe I can start believing in myself too. Jason's eyes softened, and he took a step closer, his hand reaching out to her. I'm not going anywhere, Zara. You're not alone, not anymore. Her heart surged with a quiet relief. In this strange, alien world with everything uncertain and chaotic, this one thing was crystal clear. Jason was her choice, just as she was his. And together they would navigate this unknown world. But Zara knew, deep down, that her decision was more than just about Jason. It was about her. She was finally letting go of the past, finally giving herself the chance to live. For herself. This wasn't just a new beginning for her and Jason, it was a new beginning for her soul. A chance to rebuild what had been shattered for so long. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs. The wind whispered through the alien trees, as though the planet itself was telling her it was time to move forward. I'm staying, Zara said finally, her voice steady, strong. I'm staying here. With you, this is my choice. And I'm not turning back. Jason smiled, his hand gently brushing against hers, and Zara felt the warmth of something she hadn't known in years' peace. It was the beginning of something new, something powerful, and it was hers to shape. The future was uncertain, yes. But for the first time, Zara didn't feel afraid. The decision had been made. She was ready for whatever came next. Together they would face it. The moons of Zara's world hung low in the sky, their silvery glow casting a soft light across the landscape, painting everything in shades of blue and lavender. For the first time, Zara felt like she truly belonged to the world beneath her feet. She wasn't an outsider here. She wasn't the burden, the disappointment, the girl who didn't fit in. She was part of something bigger now, something new and full of possibility. It had been a few months since Zara had made her choice, and every day she felt the weight of her past lift from her shoulders. The pain of her abandonment by her family was still there, but it was no longer defining her. It had simply become a part of her story, not the whole of it. And with Jason by her side, she had found a sense of peace she hadn't known existed. The camp they had built together was humble, nestled by a quiet stream in a secluded valley. Zara had grown to love the peaceful rhythm of her new life, the quiet mornings, the shared meals, the small moments of joy that had once seemed so out of reach. She had found a place in this strange world, and it was hers, all hers. Jason was busy building a new shelter, one that would be sturdier, more permanent. It had been his idea, of course. He was always thinking ahead, always planning, always working. Zara had never seen anyone with such determination, and it inspired her. As she helped him gather materials, she noticed how their movements had become synchronized over time. They no longer spoke in words all the time sometimes. They simply understood each other with a glance, a subtle movement. She had never known a connection like this, one so effortless and deep. It was during one of these quiet moments as they worked side by side that Jason paused and looked up at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in him before: hope. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow, "about what comes next. We've built a life here, but we could do more. I don't know if we'll ever get off this planet, but we can make something of it. We don't have to just survive. We can thrive." Together, Zara felt her heart quicken at his words. It was true, what he said. They had already started building a life here, in the heart of the unknown. It hadn't been easy, but it had been fulfilling. They had created something new from the ashes of their pasts. And now, there was nothing holding them back. "We can," she replied, her voice strong and filled with newfound certainty. "We don't need to go back. We don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. We can build a future here, just the two of us." Jason smiled, and in that moment it felt as if the world had shifted. It wasn't just the two of them building a life anymore. It was the beginning of a legacy, a future where they would carve out their own place, their own purpose. They weren't just survivors. They were creators, architects of a new world. They spent the next few weeks working together, expanding their camp, planting crops, and making their shelter stronger. The planet, once an intimidating place of desolation, was now something else entirely. It was their home, their sanctuary. One day, while exploring a nearby forest, Zara discovered a small clearing, untouched by time, filled with vibrant flowers that seemed to glow with an ethereal light. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The colors of the plants shimmered, and the air was filled with a sweet, almost musical hum. For a moment, Zara stood there in awe, breathing in the strange but beautiful air. It felt like magic. She returned to camp and showed Jason the clearing, her heart racing with excitement. Together, they decided to transform the area into something meaningful, a symbol of their new life. They built a small garden in the center, surrounded by the glowing flowers, and spent hours there each day, nurturing the land and each other. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. The future was still uncertain. There were still dangers lurking in the unknown, but Zara no longer feared what lay ahead. With Jason, she had everything she needed. She had a purpose, a home, and the love of someone who saw her for who she truly was. One evening, as they sat by the fire, watching the stars flicker above them, Zara realized something profound. It wasn't the ship that had come to rescue her that she had waited for all these years. It wasn't the return of her family. It wasn't anyone's approval. What she had been waiting for was this moment, this place, this life. A life she had built on her own terms, a life where she could finally be free. "We've done it, haven't we?" Zara said, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "We've created something real." Jason looked at her, his smile soft and full of affection. "Yeah, we have. And it's just the beginning." In the soft glow of the fire, surrounded by the strange beauty of this alien world, Zara knew that her journey was far from over. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had found something worth fighting for, something worth living for. This world, with its strange landscapes and endless possibilities, was her new home. And she, Zara, was no longer a burden. She was the architect of her own future. And together with Jason, they would shape it.